There's no doubt that probably the two most exciting times when being a Hot Toys collector is waking up and seeing an announcement from Hot Toys and seeing the photos on social media. Probably the next most exciting thing is when something you ordered is actually released and you see those final blogger photos. Now everyone jumps on social media and offers their thoughts on, if the figure looks good, and they're usually pretty harsh on the actual photos themselves, offering their own opinions as to why they think either something looks good or doesn't look good. But what if we had the opportunity to actually understand the process and speak to someone that actually takes those photos? Well, that's what this video is going to be today, a pre-recorded conversation with Alex Brooks, who is one of the Hot Toy blogger photographers. When you get an idea of seeing what he actually photographed, you'll know his work pretty quickly, and he'll be able to take us behind the lens and understand the process that goes through being a blogger for Hot Toys, and maybe even give us a little bit of a taste of his editing process, more specifically on a figure that caused a lot of, I think, a little bit unnecessary drama in the hobby, and it's none other than the 1989 Batman 2.0 that Alex had the fortune of photographing. And he is going to show us a little demonstration of a raw photograph to the final edited product that did ultimately make it into the packet of photos that was released on Facebook. So sit back and enjoy this conversation. And the goal here was to humanize the person, and hopefully there's a little more understanding of what goes into those photos before very harshly criticizing them, and understand the thought process that goes into all of this. So once again, enjoy this conversation. Drop a like on the video and definitely support Alex. I will link all of his Instagram, Facebook information in the description below. Give him a like, give him a follow. So here is the conversation with Alex Brooks. All right. So Alex, thank you so much for having this conversation. Like I said, I reached out to you on Instagram, and it might have been a little bit off the cuff. I know,
Mhm.
like I said, it's something maybe I don't know how often you get reached out for in terms of situations like this. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to quickly jump on. This actually happened quite fast. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I mean, it's my pleasure. I mean, funnily enough, I don't actually get invited that often to these kinds of things, so I'm more than happy to oblige.
And the reason I just want to give you some backstory very quickly, but the reason why I reached out is because, as collectors, these are obviously expensive items that people collect. They're
Hmm.
passionate is probably the nicest word that I could say. People are very passionate, and I know people, like, especially over in the United States, 99% of these high-end collectibles, like Hot Toys specifically, we are relying on photos. We're relying on,
Hmm.
photography, and we're relying on, basically the initial announcement photos that Hot Toys puts up, and then a year or so
Hmm.
later, we rely on, blogger photos of what the final product looks like. And a lot of us have these already on pre-order and we're excited for them. And then some people I
Hmm.
know choose to not order stuff because they're purposely waiting to see what the final product looks like to determine whether or not they're going to spend their money. And so, a lot of it's something very interesting because I kind of want to peel back and humanize the situation, because people look at these photos and, I joke, everyone's a photographer, everyone's got comments, everyone says everything. And so I thought it would be a nice conversation just to kind of go behind the lens a little bit, and have a conversation with, someone like yourself, that you are a photographer who does the photos. And I know we're going to address it, but you more specifically recently did the 1989 Batman, which that had a lot of questions and concerns of its own right.
Yeah,
But
sure did.
just to kind of give some
Hmm.
backstory, how did was photography something that you started as, like, when you were younger or through school? Like, how did you actually get into photography itself?
I kind of fell into it in a way. I mean, I've always kind of had that artistic side because I'm actually a graphic designer by trade, so
Oh,
that's my
nice.
full-time job. So I've always kind of been into kind of the visual arts, that kind of
Mhm.
thing. I did study photography at college, although I never really got into it. I didn't really progress from there, and it wasn't really until around 2015 I got into. I kind of stumbled into toy photography. I'd kind of rekindled my love of Lego, having seen an old a Ghostbusters set that had come onto the market. Obviously, a child of the '80s myself, I loved that
Right,
movie.
right, right. There it is.
I just bought this Lego set on a whim. It was the Ecto one. obviously built it, and then I didn't kind of know what to do with it after that. So I started to take shots of it just on my camera phone, and I sort of found that I really enjoyed doing that kind of thing, taking the shots, different angles, starting to create scenes, things like that.
Yeah.
And it progressed there. So I kind of started with Lego really, and I had a whole Lego Instagram account where I would, rebuild popular scenes from movies like Kill Bill, The Matrix, RoboCop, all kinds of different films, and that kind of really started to take off. And at that time, I wasn't kind of aware of the whole 1/6 toy photography scene. I didn't even know that Hot Toys existed at that
Yeah.
point in time. So obviously being exposed to the community online, sort of seeing other people's photographs, I started to sort of see more and more of this other side of toy photography, not just kind of Lego. I was seeing kind of 12th scale,
Mhm.
your SH Figuarts, your Mafex figures, your
Right.
Legend, Marvel Legends, things like that. And I started to be intrigued by that, and I thought, I want to kind of try my hand at that as well. So I kind of I progressed from Lego into 1/12 scale. I created my new kind of Instagram account, BG Toy Art, and then I progressed from there. I started to, see Hot Toys photos, and I really fell in love with those figures. I thought, these are amazing. These things look lifelike. Moving on from kind of the smaller scale stuff, which they
Yeah,
do look like
100%.
toys that you had as a kid, but
Yeah.
now that this stuff's looking like real kind of real life, like in the handcrafting that goes into it was amazing. So I got bought myself a few Hot Toys figures, and kind of it went from there really. So I kind of I learned everything about photography from scratch, really, from watching YouTube videos. There's a lot of information out there if you want to kind of do it yourself.
Yeah.
All of my lighting setups, everything I had to kind of learn from scratch. So I kind of just acquired that knowledge myself to kind of get to where I am now, which is, I wouldn't describe it as kind of a professional setup by any means. It's kind of just the way that I've progressed myself, having taught myself how to do it really. So it's been a bit of a journey. So yeah, I've been doing that now since Hot Toys. I've been shooting since about 2016.
I don't consider myself a professional by any means. It's funny, we share a common background. I went to school
Mm-hmm.
for graphic design also, so I was a graphic designer as well,
Okay.
and I did photography because you kind of, when you do graphic design, they make you do photo classes. So I started doing photography
Yeah, they
as
they
part
kind
of
of
that.
go hand in hand, don't they?
They
Yeah,
want you to,
yeah.
exactly. They want you to like kind of mix medium stuff. So you said a couple things I want to touch on that kind of encapsulate some of the questions. So you said obviously Legos, which is really interesting because I find a lot of people like me, I started out with Legos as a kid. There's just something about
Mm-hmm.
Lego. I just don't know what it is. And like I said, I have Ghostbusters sets up behind me. If you look up top here, there's
Oh
Lego
yeah, cool.
Ghostbusters up.
Yeah.
I have all Ghostbusters and I have Lego
Mm-hmm.
Ghostbusters. And there's something about Lego that everyone starts out with Legos. It's really funny how
Yeah.
Legos for a lot of people is
Uh,
just, it's easy access and it's the first thing that everyone
It's
gravitates towards.
universal. Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
I think it appeals to most people, and like I say, I mean, the adult fan of Lego, they're called adult fans of Lego now. That's the official designation. There's
Yeah,
a whole market there now of adults who were into it as a kid, who are now kind of fans of it as adults, because it
absolutely.
doesn't really have an age range, and then
Yeah.
they make sets specifically for adults now. So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
amazing.
the appeal of it is so broad.
So I have to ask you, you touched on Hot Toys. Do you remember
Hmm.
what your first Hot Toy was that you purchased?
Yes, it was the Arkham Batman. Um,
Nice.
It
Nice.
was, yeah. I mean, because I think like yourself, Ryan, I've always been a fan of Batman. It's probably one of my favorite kind of
Yeah.
figures to shoot. I've shot a lot of the different Batman figures over the years, but I'm a big fan of of that game series by Rocksteady, and
Mhm.
yeah, I mean that was one of the first figures that I purchased, and then from there I also got the original kind of DX Heath Ledger Joker as well.
Yep.
That was a that was quite a big purchase because that was going for such a lot of money at the
Yeah,
time. Whereas obviously
absolutely.
since then we've had a complete flood of Heath Ledgers since then, but at the time it was quite kind of difficult to get hold of. So yeah, I've always kind of been into that kind of DC Batman universe. So that was my first sort of dip into Hot Toys.
That's pretty crazy. Now from a photography standpoint, if you could touch on it, I'm just curious. The equipment, I know you said, like you said, a lot of it was from YouTube videos and things like that. Do you
Yeah.
have like a kind of, when it comes to shooting like Hot Toys, we'll get into that in a moment, but like what your kind of
Mm-hmm.
equipment setup is like in terms of like what camera would you use for Hot Toys if you're shooting? Or do you have a variety of equipment that you use depending on the figure or
Yeah,
lighting?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a variety of kind of lighting equipment that I sometimes swap between, dependent on the figure. But in terms of the actual camera itself, I've only got one camera, and that's a Nikon D7200. So I mean, that's not high end
Hmm.
DSLR by any means. It's kind of middle
Yeah,
range.
yeah.
Obviously, at the time when I was looking into getting myself a camera, upgrading from the camera phone, there was kind of, there just seemed to be a choice between Canon and Nikon. I went for Nikon.
My wife
And
will
I've
love
not
you.
kind of
My wife will love you. She's a Nikon person, so she'll love you for that.
okay. Sorry, yeah, I've got the pronunciation different there.
No, no, no. Sure.
Nikon. But I usually flip now between two different lenses that I use. I'll usually favour the 50 millimeter lens.
Hmm.
Um, for most shots, and then I've got a 90 millimeter Tamron lens. I mean, that's not like a high end make. It was
Yeah,
one of the cheaper 90 millimeter lenses that I was able to afford at the time, and I use that for a lot of the kind of the close up shots.
yeah.
In terms of lighting, I've got a couple of soft boxes
Hmm.
that I'll alternate between. Again, I mean, they're just real cheap things off of Amazon. You know, I didn't go for any specific high end make for those. I've got a couple of trigger flashes that I use as well, so you can put kind of colored gels on those to change the color of the highlights.
Yeah.
And then I've got like an LED, one of these LED kind of light ones, which kind
Yes.
of lets you dial in specific colors. So, you know, if there's a
Yes.
specific shade of orange or green that you want, then you can kind of dial that in. So that's great for kind of getting some color cast and stuff onto your figures. So yeah, just a couple of flashes, light wand, and then, you know, other standard equipment like light bounce reflectors,
Yep.
things like that to help, you know, fill in light and things like that. So nothing kind of over the top really, just kind of fairly standard equipment, I'd say.
I think sometimes people get lost in that you don't need the most expensive equipment out there. You don't need to spend $4,000 on a camera and all. It just, like you
Yeah.
said, it just very basic stuff and just some learning can
Mm-hmm.
really just get the job done. And you don't need to break the bank.
I was gonna say I've actually got a kind of a behind the scenes photo of my setup, which I can share for you
Yeah,
now if you like. I mean,
absolutely. If you like, yeah,
it's from the Batman shoot. So if I
yeah. If
just
you want,
share
yeah,
this
I'll share.
quickly,
Yeah.
so this is
Oh wow.
hopefully you can see this.
Yes, I do. Oh
So I've
wow.
kind of tried to label this down. Now this is a bit of a mess because, you know, I actually shoot inside of my garage
Hmm.
on a picnic table. It's not, like I say, it's not like a lab environment. It can get quite dusty in
Yeah,
there, and
absolutely.
but so for instance, here we've got a remote light over here on the right hand side, with a blue gel on the top. So that casts in some blue light from behind to the right hand side of the figure. Got my LED light one there on the left, and I've kind of blocked that out with this piece of foam, so that stops the glare shining into the camera when you're taking the final shot. Got the light reflector there at Batman's feet, so again that just bounces a bit of light back in and fills some of the light back in. Got a standard kind of fabric backdrop. Um, that's my camera there in the
Hmm.
foreground, and I've got the 90 millimeter lens attached to that at the moment. There's my 50 millimeter lens over there on the tabletop, and just a general mess of stuff. So for this particular shot, although the softbox is turned on, the big softbox here on the left, that was only used for getting the focus set up
Hmm.
on the camera. I then turned that softbox off, and then I manually held another flash in front of the figure so that when I remote shutter released, the front flash went off, the side flash went off. Obviously, the LED white light wand is on the whole time, so you kind of got 3 points of light,
Yep.
and it kind of created quite a dark shot because I'm not kind of filling in the background with the soft. Both the soft boxes were off for these shots, so just a quick kind of intro to kind of how I did some of my shots. I don't shoot everything like that. Other times I'll use the actual soft boxes, turn them on if I want to light the figure a lot more, especially if you're doing shots where you want to make them look like they're outdoors. Then
Yeah.
I'll obviously flood in a lot more light. But this one I wanted to make it feel a bit more darker. So yeah, that's just a kind of one of my kind of setups, and I'll change it up dependent on the shot, really.
Batman, for example, how early did you shoot this versus when we saw the blogger photos? Like, was this weeks in advance, days in advance? Was it a rush
It
job or?
It varies, and I think that's dependent on their production. You
Okay.
know, the things are rolling off their production line at different times, and they've got different deadlines. So, I mean, a typical shoot for me, I would get about a week.
Mhm.
So they'd send me the figure. Obviously, it takes me probably a couple of days longer than most of the bloggers because they have to ship the figure out to me in the UK, whereas I think a lot of the other bloggers are based
in
either in
Asia.
Hong Kong
Yeah,
or in that region, so they
correct.
kind of they can get it a lot quicker. So I lose a couple of days in that regard. And then Hot Toys will kind of tell me that they want it back by such a date. Now that isn't the date it releases to on Facebook. That'll be the date that they want their production staff to kind of check over the photos, make sure they're all okay. They want to make sure that you haven't done anything wrong with any of the accessories or there's anything
Hmm.
kind of gone awry. So they and then typically another day or so after that, then they'll release them online. So about a week, I'll get about a week, but obviously with a full-time job and a young family, I'm not getting a full week's worth of time to work on it. I have to dedicate kind of evenings, and sometimes I can steal some hours in a weekend to kind of work on it as well. So
I think you
although a week might sound generous,
Yeah, no, I remember you and I had a conversation, I
it's
think with Deadpool, because we did Deadpool too. And I remember you telling me like you were kind of crunching for Deadpool. You were doing those photos too. I
yeah,
think we were talking
yeah,
on Instagram.
yeah,
You said I think there was a couple of days you said, I'm so sorry to get back to you. I was in a pinch doing photos and stuff and then Deadpool came out. So I do remember you saying that. Another question that I
yeah.
have is when you are doing the photos, does Hot Toys give you any parameters? Like for example, this pose that you have, I remember this is an actual photo that
Mhm.
was released. I remember this pose because you're the final photo. So does Hot
Yeah,
Toys kind of
yeah.
say to you like, hey Batman, you have basically carte blanche to do what you want, but we need like a specific pose of X, Y, and Z, but the rest, like how much freedom do you have as the photographer to shoot this figure versus what Hot Toys is expecting of you?
You get quite a lot of freedom, to be fair.
Hmm.
Sometimes you'll get what's called a kind of a shoot guide that they'll
Okay.
send ahead of a figure, and that will just give you information on how specific accessories should be held, or how a specific part of a clothing should fall or be worn. They won't usually tell you to do a specific pose or try and ask you to do a specific thing with the figure. I mean, on Batman here, I mean they did say please try and capture the iconic pose where he's got his arms out with the cape,
Yeah.
full extension. Which I think I watched your review and I think you had fun trying to get Batman into that position as well. I mean, it's
That was a
possible,
very
but
difficult pose. Yeah, I
it's a
admit
pain in the it's
I wasn't perfect at it.
pain in the ass
Yeah.
to get him into that. But so yeah, I mean, you will get a bit of creative freedom, but at the end of the day, they're trying to sell a product, so they're going to want the photographs to show that in as good a light as possible. So you can't do shots that are really dark and moody and where you can't really see too much of the figure. They always want to make sure that that the face is lit nicely, or you can see details of the figure. So if you're trying to go for real realism, if you want your photos to look like a screenshot, sometimes there's a bit of a balance in that there because it's a trade off between kind of making it look like it's come off the movie screen and then actually trying to sell the product itself to make sure that you can see everything on there. So yeah, you do have to kind of balance it out a little bit.
That's a really great point that's a fantastic point that you just said, because that is something that gets lost a lot when it comes to, obviously, like I hate like all the YouTuber side of stuff, but we see these
Mm-hmm.
photos, we react to them, and there are times when it's like, wow, does that really look? And you, like I said, you're humanizing the aspect of it that we want these to jump off the page like that's Michael Keaton, but at the end of the day, it's a 12-inch fit.
Mm-hmm.
It's a toy at the end of the day. It's meant to be a
Yeah.
product. It's not Michael Keaton. And I'm gonna segue into something that um I'm very passionate about Michael Keaton. Like he is my Batman, and I got very passionate about this release. And I think
I'll
you kind of
stop
know where
clearing
I'm.
up for the time.
I think you know where I'm kind of going with this. Is
Yeah.
you touched on it with the details, and we had a sidebar conversation. I'd like to expand on them a little bit, but everybody was freaking out over that new Batman and the texture on the suit, and people were just,
Yeah.
oh my God, like it was getting me, like I'm trying to like compose myself about it. And I was watching other like people online saying, well, I think that they just over sharpened the photo. They just over sharpened the whole thing. The details really can't be that bad. They just edited the photo, and it's bad editing. And I'm not saying, no disrespect by any means, but these are
That's
comments
fine.
like, oh, it's bad editing. And they over sharpened everything, and it can't be that, it can't be what that is. And it can't be what that is. And well, I have the figure in hand, and I can say that your photos did it justice. You presented the
Yeah.
product how you're going to get it. And that's kind of what I was trying to convey to people
Yeah,
is
and I think I said to you in our conversation, it's not my job to kind of try and pull the wool over people's eyes, or
correct.
I want to show people, what the final product is. If the texture's there, it's going to show up in my photographs. So I didn't make a conscious effort to try and hide it. I think you could have done easily, with certain lighting setups,
Yep.
you could make that texture look a lot less kind of um, prominent. But the fact of the matter is, it's there. It's on the suit, and if you have the figure in hand, you can see that texture. So I'm like I say, I'm trying to be honest with the photography. I know sometimes I'll get accused of kind of photoshopping stuff too much. But again, people aren't seeing my process. They're not seeing what's gone into the shots. I do not alter the figures in any way using Photoshop. All I'm doing is kind of adding some backgrounds. I'll maybe add some effects over the top, like some atmospheric haze, or if it's an Iron Man or a lightsaber, I'll add a bit of glow. But
Mhm.
I won't go in and kind of edit the product itself. If there's a joint line or a seam line, I'm not going to kind of get rid of that. That's there. That's part of the figure.
Yeah.
Um,
You can see my screen, right? What I'm sharing. These are the photos.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I
I just
mean
want.
that shot you have there on screen is the one that
Yep.
was from my setup picture. So that's kind of what the final photograph ends up looking like.
And that's what I was trying to convey, where I did obviously a very extensive review on the figure, and then
Mm-hmm.
I actually just accidentally, but I did release a comparison video this morning at like 4:30 a.m. my time. It was meant to be 4:30 p.m. and I was half asleep once again with sleep deprived with kids and stuff. I accidentally released it at
Yeah.
4:30 a.m. But I did do a comparison on this figure versus the old DX, and I was trying to explain to people like the tech, like there was two arguments about this figure is that it's not accurate to the
Mm-hmm.
suit. Well, that's one argument, but the other
Yeah.
thing is the texture and everything is there in the photos, so like what you're seeing is what you get. But to be fair, and I think you can attest it, like I said, you have to get this thing in hand. There are just some figures
Yeah.
you have to get it in hand and realize it's not as bad as what you might think in your head you
Mm-hmm.
think it is. Yes, the
Yeah.
figure, like the photos are representing I can say that your photography on this Batman is representing it, I think 100% perfect to the way that it is. It's fantastic
Mm-hmm.
work. And like I said, this is coming from someone, I have the figure and it represents it exactly. You didn't make it, you just photographed it. And
Yeah.
so I,
Yeah.
I give kudos, fantastic work on this figure. um and yes, nailing that pose was very difficult, and I give you absolute props. And I'm looking at your photo, I see what you did that I didn't do, and how you actually
Folded the
manipulate the
cape
hands a
over
little
the
bit better.
yeah.
I did, yeah, I know you told me try, good luck trying to get that pose. And
Yeah,
that's
I had to
very,
kind of fold the cape over because he holds these two plastic rods, and you can
yes,
kind of see a bit of the rod there. But
yes.
I kind of folded the cape over a little bit, so that ended up kind of being shadowed away. But again, I've not altered it in any way. That
And
you're able to get him. You can get him into that pose if you take the time.
and once again, this comes back to, yes, we see your name up in the corner, but people, I think, understand the amount of photos that are associated with you. And yes, I know other bloggers are used. Sometimes Hot Toys will upload a combination of photos from different people.
I was going to say every release they do. I'm not sure exactly how many bloggers they use, but I think there's probably in the region of 5 or 6 of us that they
Yeah.
have. And every release they do, they'll send the figure out to at least 4 of us. So when you get those final blogger photos, they're taken by 4 different people, and
Yep.
you can usually tell the difference of who's done what just by looking at the watermark. I mean, obviously I'm one. You got, I think Ultra Ben is one of the others. You got Kinder Toys,
Hmm.
CGE Rock, things like that. So you'll
CG
be able to
Rockets.
tell the
Yep.
photos apart. But yeah, so you're going to get 4 different people, 4 different sets of lighting, the way that we shoot. Some of us, like
Styles,
myself,
just different
I do.
styles and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I do composite photography. So I'm shooting and then I'm cutting out the figure and I'm compositing that onto a background. Others of them will do it all in camera. They'll have a TV screen behind their figure
Hmm.
to add that backdrop. So we've all got different styles of photography, which is why sometimes it does make me laugh when you do get those typical comments, oh, the blogger photos are trash, as if you're going to be able to do any better kind of on your camera phone at home. But it is what it is. They're trying to give you different shots from different people to show you what the actuality of the final product is. And people will always disagree with the photos, and because it is subjective at the end of the day. And photos are subjective, and definitely the likenesses on figures are very subjective, as we see the arguments online. I mean, at the moment, there's a lot with the Harry Potters. I mean, I don't have a horse in that race, but it's quite funny seeing seeing the
Right.
arguments that go on online in regarding the likenesses of competing sort of
Well, that's what's
manufacturers
interesting is that you have like you know you have like in art, and then you have like J&D who's doing silicone. So silicone is
yeah,
not going to look the same as
yeah.
sculpting. So and even like hair and stuff. It's obviously it goes back to the age old with social media. It gives every I joke and say social media gives everybody a voice, and you have to like as an
Hmm.
individual kind of differentiate what kind of find your own path and kind of filter through a lot of stuff. And so like these are photos here. I'm flipping through quickly because there's a lot of stuff, but do you probably, if you don't mind, a figure and then an IP, but like do you have a you kind of mentioned Batman, things like that, but is there a
Hmm.
particular figure or style of figure that you find difficult to shoot in terms of capturing, either maybe posing it like if it like Spider-Man, or is there a certain kind of character that just
Yeah, I mean,
gives you kind of a hard time that you kind of overcome a little bit, a little more obstacles?
Spider-Man will always be difficult because this guy, the character himself, is hyper flexible, and with a Hot Toys figure, you're not going to achieve a realistic Spider-Man pose. If he's got his knee up by the side of his ear, you're not gonna bend a Hot Toys figure into that kind of pose. The closest I've ever come to having a figure that does that is there's a company called 1000 Toys, and they're from Japan, and they make these little 12 scale sort of synthetic human figures, and that's the only figure I've ever had where you could kind of achieve these almost realistic Spider-Man poses. So, yeah, I mean, it is difficult to kind of get that, and you have to be creative with your angles. Sometimes it's about kind of rotating the figure and sort of hiding if there's an awkward bend in the back, or to make so because sometimes shots in camera look better than they do in reality when you're seeing them with your own eyes. So you have to be creative sometimes with the camera angles to make it look right. Other figures that are challenge are definitely the high reflective ones. So one of the ones in more recent memory is probably the re-release of the Mando figure, which was chrome plated.
Yes,
Anything like
yes.
that, it's like a mirror. So anything, even including yourself, is going to show up
Happened to me.
in that if you're not careful.
That
Yeah,
happened I took some
and
photos
any
on
and,
Instagram and you see me in the reflection. I'm like, oh man.
yeah, if you got any crap on your table that I've got, I've got my picnic bench that I shoot on. If I've got anything on there, that's going to reflect in there. So you have to be really
Yeah.
careful what's showing. You'll quite often see the shape of people's soft boxes and stuff, and with the best will in the world, you can't hide all of that stuff on those types of
Oh, there you
figures.
go. Oh
Some
man,
of the Iron Man figures are quite difficult like that as well. So yeah, I mean, you can quite clearly see the shape of the soft boxes reflected into that figure just because of the nature of it. So they're more of the challenging ones. I think as well, because again, the style that I do, I literally cut out every single figure that I photograph. So that in itself is a massive time consuming job. So if it's a really complex figure that's got lots of kind of intricate edges. I think the worst one I did recently was the Iron Man with the gantry, because
oh,
he had the intricate kind of arms on the gantry. I had to go around and cut out all the individual arms and everything. I mean, that one's not as difficult. Yeah, that kind of shot there, you got all kind of a negative space in between those arms that needed to be cut out, so then I could put the background in. So ones like that were a bit of a nightmare for me because I'm spending probably most of my time cutting that figure out because that's just the style of the photography I do. People will say, well, you should have just stuck a backdrop in there, but that's just the style that I've settled on, and it gives me flexibility to be able to swap out the backgrounds if I'm not happy, be able to move them around in post. And that's kind of what I'm most comfortable doing with
yeah.
my style of photography. So
Is there any figures that you love to shoot in terms of Hot Toys? Like if you know that you're getting like I'm assuming like if you get like a Batman, you're probably like, yes, Batman, like that kind of thing.
yeah,
Is there any ones that you just absolutely like, I cannot wait to get this figure to like when I guess when you because you don't do every single figure, obviously.
no,
You get but you
no,
seems like you do a good percentage, but when you know like, hey, I'm getting Batman 89, I'm sure that you definitely got you a little excited that I'm getting Batman 89 to photograph. Is there anything out there that does that kind of like when you know
yeah,
something's in the pipeline? Like,
definitely anything Batman related. Like I say, I'm a big fan of Batman. I've always shot as many of those figures as I'm able to, or they're happy to send to me. I'm a fan of Star Wars as well, and I've done quite a lot of Vaders over my time.
Yeah, that
That's
Obi-Wan Vader
definitely
was
one.
oh my
Yeah,
God.
I mean, I
Yeah.
really enjoy doing that. Because I've got a real kind of passion for movies as well, so it gives me a chance to rewatch stuff as well. If I know a figure's coming, I'll sit down and I'll rewatch the film or the TV show it's based on to get inspiration for the
Yeah.
poses and kind of maybe the lighting conditions, things like that. So yeah, anything kind of Star Wars really, I quite enjoy. Although looking at the General Grievous, I'd probably give that one a miss because that looks like a nightmare to cut out. So,
That
with
that
all the
one
intricate arms to do, yeah,
yeah, that one
as
is
amazing as it looks.
that one is definitely one of those that people are looking forward to in terms of the photos. And I had
Yeah.
the sideshow one, and yeah, I'm looking forward to that particular upgrade. As a
Hmm.
collect
Yeah.
from a from to switch from a photographer from to a collector, do you actively collect Hot Toys? I know you said you bought a couple, but are you like I know you are you actively I know I'm sure I don't know if you're getting every single one that comes out, but do you actively collect Hot Toys and kind of stay up to what's going on and if there's something you see, or you're kind of just more of a casual collector?
I'm more casual nowadays. I used to kind of buy a lot more myself.
Mhm.
Like if I didn't kind of get involved in the blogger shoots, I would buy it myself. I mean, there was
Yeah.
a couple of Captain Americas I bought like that. There was a concept cap that they did
Yep.
one year in the black suit
Yep.
that I bought. More recently, I mean, because I actually got out of the hobby for about a couple of years at one
Okay.
point, um, just because my time was just getting, I was burning the candle at both ends. Basically,
Yeah.
I was just getting, it was just becoming too much. So I left the hobby, and then I recently came back in again, and around the time that Mysterio was released
Yep.
from the Spider-Man movie, and I kind of got back into it again, and I've started to steadily do more and more. I mean, as my boys have grown up, I've got more and more kind of free time to dedicate back to the hobby again.
Yeah.
I mean, I've recently bought a couple of my own figures, but not Hot Toys. I'm a big fan of RoboCop.
Yep.
One of the one of one of
80s.
the
Let's go.
releases I'm always, yeah. I mean, I'm gutted that I missed out on the Murphy sculpt one from Hot Toys. I mean, I know that's on the aftermarket, but it's extortionate.
Yes.
If they re-released that, I would jump on that in a heartbeat. But recently bought the Mafex version of that, so
Yes.
it's 1/12 scale,
Yes.
and I'm looking forward to finding some time of photographing that guy at some point. And I also ordered the Mondo. What's his name? McCready from The
Yes.
Thing.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah, I've got
scary.
that.
I'm just getting into 1/12 and Mondo too, as a matter of fact. I got a couple Mafex
Yeah,
Spider-Man figures, and I'm just like I saw those Mafex
yeah,
RoboCops, and I'm like I really got to resist. I have the two Hot Toys. I have the original and I have the RoboCop 3. I'm like, but the Mafex
yeah,
is just, and that's one thing about the 12 scale is that from a photography point of view, I mean, like I said, I have Spider-Man, I have stuff all. It just gives you the freedom that Hot Toys they're great, but you also don't want to damage them because
yeah,
they're expensive pieces. But
yeah. Sure.
I'm more
Yeah.
comfortable posing a Mafex or even I'm not even gonna lie,
Hmm.
Marvel Legends. I mean, people knock them,
Yeah.
but it's sometimes it's just fun, man. I mean, we're older collectors, and I think sometimes
Yeah.
it's you kind of forget it's just fun. Like it's just fun to sit there and pose and just take a shot
Yeah.
versus like
Yeah, for me,
not being too
it's a form
serious,
of escape. I enjoy it.
right?
It's a hobby. When I'm doing it, I'm not thinking about anything else. You know, the stresses of everyday life. I'm just
Yeah,
enjoying the
no,
hobby for what it is,
absolutely.
and it's a great escape. I think.
Yeah. One question I did have, I didn't want to slip, and I know it's kind of backtracking, but how did you actually get into working for Hot Toys? Did they reach out to you, or did you like apply, or did they find your stuff on social
Yeah,
media?
no, yeah. So, like I say, when I kind of progressed from Lego, and then I created my new account when I
Yeah.
was messing around with kind of the 1/12 stuff. So now I bought my first few Hot Toys figures, and I was just posting those figures online, and then just one day out of the blue, I got a message on Instagram from a guy
Wow.
at Hot Toys. He
Wow.
kind of explained, what a blogger is and what they
Yeah.
do. I didn't have any idea this kind of thing existed. So would I be interested in doing it as a kind of just a one off, just to give it a go, see if it was mutually kind of
Yeah, it worked
workable.
out.
And I think yeah, so well, obviously I jumped at the chance, and I think my first one was the Captain America from Civil War.
Yes.
I mean, I look back at those shots now, and I wince because I mean I hate I hate what I did with it. That's one thing you can do if you go back through my timeline on Instagram. You can see a progression. And I think anybody would, if you're doing kind of toy photography over a period of time, you will improve, and you'll notice mistakes through time. But yeah, I mean, it was a really great thing to do at the time, and they wanted to keep me on sort of from there. So yeah, I've been very fortunate. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm very blessed to do what I do. It's not a paid thing. In case anyone thinks that we get paid to do this, it's not. It's a completely free thing that we do. We give up our time. Obviously, we get to keep the figures, yeah, but I
So
kind of see
so
that as a trade-off.
so
I'm
that's what
giving
I
them
was.
my time,
Yeah.
and
So that's
and
what actually I was
and
going to
you know,
ask you. I was going to ask you that. So I want to, once again, I didn't want to get too personal in terms of, like I said, you didn't
hmm
stop me when it, but you kind of just touched on it. So you don't get paid from them to do the photos. So the compensation is you get to keep the figure and do with it as you wish.
yeah,
And then like, even if you want to take
yeah.
it, get rid of it or whatever it is, but that's your compensation. They'll give you the
hmm
photo. Okay. So I was just curious about that. Because that's something a lot of people were curious about in terms of, you know, you know, the perks, I guess you could say, about it. So they're doing that. So that's actually
Yeah,
really cool. It's a way to build a collection, I suppose. If
yeah,
you're into that.
definitely. And I'd say, and I wouldn't underestimate how much time that we. Well, I can't speak for all the bloggers, but I know that I pour in so much time into
I was
this.
gonna,
So I would say it's a more than kind of fair
yeah,
transaction.
I was gonna
I mean,
say
I
you're.
pour hours and hours into this stuff. So although some people might go, oh, that's not really fair. He's getting to keep this figure for free and then whatever. But
No, no,
I
no,
am
no.
putting in a lot of time. So
Well, judging by your aspect of what you said with the compositing, that takes an awful lot of time. And once again,
yeah.
you unintentionally hit on something that, once again, I want to drive home, is the human side of it. Is that you have a family, you have kids, and you're spending,
hmm
you like you said, you're spending your time less than a week to cram out all of these photos. It's nice though,
I,
because you're doing something for a company that people are seeing, and there's got to be pride in that,
yeah.
and that's just an amazing
And
opportunity.
And at the end of the day, this was my hobby. This is I
Yes.
before I did it for Hot Toys. I was doing it for my own personal enjoyment, and that's why I still do it, because
Yes.
I enjoy it. It's a hobby that I do in my spare time. Yeah, I've got this great perk of being sent these figures, but I'm only doing it because I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it for that added benefit
Yeah.
or just purely for free stuff, because otherwise I
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to keep doing it for as long as I have. Because
Absolutely.
I do enjoy it. Every figure I get, I go through a process.
Yeah.
Like I say, I get to rewatch the old films and immerse
It's
myself
it's it's awesome.
in that figure. So
And how many people get to say they do what they love in terms of the hobby and stuff? It's absolutely
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. I
But
mean, the only downside, like I say, is you are doing it in your free time, and you do
yes.
end up burning that candle at both ends. Most of us, we have full time jobs as well, so we've got
Hmm.
all of that to cope with, and then you do get precious time if you've got kids as well. So you have precious free time, and
Balance.
you do end up kind of staying in up to the small hours in the morning doing this stuff. I'm sure you do the same,
Yep.
recording your videos.
Yeah.
It's the only time you get, and then you pay for it the next day.
Yeah, no, I am.
But
You're 100% right. Um, I guess what we could do is we fantastic conversation, by the way. I thank you so much once again for taking the time. I think maybe we could wrap up with, if you want to share your screen and kind of wrap up with the
Mhm.
demonstration that you have.
I mean, like I said, I've got nothing to hide. I'm happy to go through. I mean, I can't go through it in complete detail because
No,
we'd
no,
be
no,
here
no.
for hours.
Yeah, no, 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 no.
Just to talk you through my workflow. So what I would do, I would obviously, before I've even got the figure, like I say, I'll immerse myself in the subject matter. So I'll get pose references and already have in my mind the kind of things I want to do with the figure before it arrives. In terms of Batman, these are raw shots. So these are straight out of the camera. So you see that I'll set up a pose, and then I will take a number of shots with slightly different lighting conditions. So all I've done on between these four shots is, you'll notice that the orange light and the white highlight on the left stay the same. It's just
Hmm.
the middle light, the flash in front, that is moving around. So I'm literally moving that around with my hand whilst
Hmm.
I'm pressing the shutter release button to get different lighting on this figure. And then once I've got this on my computer afterwards, which is now, then I'll look through, I'll review the photos that I've done, and then I'll pick the one that I think works best. So in this instance, it was this one,
Hmm.
7263. I think out of the four that I did of this particular pose, that was the one that I liked the most. So I'll take that raw shot. And I say it's raw. There's a slight bit of processing that's happened in Lightroom. So between getting it off the camera, I'll feed that into Lightroom, and I'll do any kind of minute adjustments like to exposure or shadows and highlights
Mm-hmm.
in Lightroom, and then I'll export that as a JPEG. And then what I do is I think I've already got the Photoshop file open. Okay, so this is the shot that I chose. So I've drawn the path around it. So again, like I say, people familiar with Photoshop, I've done this using a pen tool. So I mean, this is where a lot of the time comes, because I will manually on 90% of figures, I will manually trace around a figure with the pen tool to get the path to do the cutout. There are myriad of different ways of doing that in Photoshop. You can do quick selections, you can do magic wand selections, but I've
Yes.
found that if you want the crispest, most perfect cutout, there's no substitute for doing it manually.
Correct.
So then I'll take my my cutout. So you've got your cutout there, and then I'll be dropping in a background that I've found. So here is a screenshot from the movie.
Yes.
So I've gone through and collected a load of different screenshots. And what I've done is I've looked at the lighting on the figure. I know that he's got an orange highlight here. So I'm thinking, you know, there's probably going to be some sort of fire or explosion going off on that side of the shot. So I need a background that kind of looks as if the lighting is matching the shot. So here I'm taking I've taken it out of context. Obviously, this scene never happened in the film.
Yep.
I've taken a background. I've positioned it sort of roughly where I want. So the fire and the explosions down here. So it looks like that's the light that's being cast onto his face there. What I'll do is I'll kind of blur that and color balance it a little bit for this particular shot. So I've blurred that out, and then I'll add things like a bit of background smoke with a bit of color. Again, that's blurred completely out, and then I'll add maybe a bit more smoke. You can start to see kind of, and these are done using brushes that I use. So I've got a myriad of different kind of brushes in Photoshop which mimic the look of smoke, and you can, again, I manually paint that. I use a Wacom tablet. So, you know, I do tend to spend quite a bit of time working on the backgrounds as well as not doing the photography as well. Adding in things like blurred embers, a little bit of light bloom, so things like that. So you've got like the light coming from the fire, which is just over the top of Batman, so it starts to creep over the top. Mm-hmm. So you're starting to try and blend the photo with the background so they look as one. And then you've got a thing here called LUTs, which is color lookup tables. So I'm not sure how much of this translates on a video share, but this is what we'd call kind of color grading. So it's giving the shot a bit of a kind of a color grade. And then you've got a host of kind of finishing touches that go over the top. So a little bit of kind of exposure fix again, and sharpen, a little bit of sharpening on there. Nothing that's affecting, can I just, because we touched on it earlier, nothing that is going to make the texture on the suit
I was going to say that
any more than it already had.
Yeah, you're adding all those filters, and I'm watching that chest, and that it's not altering. The texture is not altering.
No. So then, you know, if you're zooming in, I mean, that's the after. That's the final shot. I mean, this is 200%, so it's looking a bit pixelated.
Yeah, of course.
But the before is here, and you'll see on the before as well. So I've got the odd dust speck on there. So the only retouching I'll do is I'll retouch things out like dust, because no matter what, unless you're working in a lab environment and you're keeping it sterile, clean, you're going to get flecks of dust appearing on your figure. So, you know, the after shot, I've taken that off. And I don't think, you know, there's anything dishonest about that. I think any product shot, you know, you're going to go in there and remove dust spots. So, yeah, it's just a few number of layers in there. But in terms of, you know, that's the raw shot, that's the finished shot. So, you know, I've not really altered the figure at all. I've added a little bit of iris blur to kind of blur off the shoulders, to kind of draw your eye more to the facial area. But in terms of going from raw to kind of finished shot, you know, I'm not really touching the figure itself. I'm adding some color overlay, color grading, but I'm not editing anything on the figure itself, other than, say, removing bits of dust, things like that. So,
and to give some perspective to those watching, if I may, and this is really rough. Like, you don't think too much into what I'm about to say, but how many finished photos did you provide for this Batman figure? At least over 20, right? If not more, at least minimum, at least.
Yeah, I mean, the quota that they ask for is that they say, they want us to do a minimum of 15 shots, I think, as a final batch for a blogger. In fact, no, they say do 15. They don't say at least 15. They say do 15. I tend to do more because I just get I get so
And-
into it that I find it really hard to discard shots in the end.
yeah.
So I just end up, especially like with the Deadpool one. I mean, I went overboard with that. I must have done about 25, 30
And
different
how long does
shots
it take you to
for
do a
that
photo?
guy.
And a photo like this Batman, roughly how long do you think you put time wise into just this one photo?
This was probably one of the more simple ones because it is just a standard kind of. It's quite an easy cutout. There's no real intricacies here. Um, this from start to finish would probably have been maybe an hour and a half, maybe that's from processing the original kind of shot in Lightroom to then doing the cutout and then doing the background. But it's difficult to put a specific number in it because then things like the backgrounds I've already put in a bit of time just set aside to capture backdrops. So if I just share here, so I've already gone through and trawled through the movie itself to pick out some backdrops. So I'll spend a bit of time, probably a couple of hours, just finding backdrops
Well,
for a photo shoot.
the reason why I say that is to give perspective to and we'll kind of wrap it up here to give perspective to, once again, the
Mm-hmm.
collector. You're investing quite. I just wanted to kind of give that exercise because, even if it's an hour per photo, you're doing 20 photos. That's a day's worth,
Mm,
if not more, that you're investing into any
yeah.
particular figure, and it varies. So, once again,
Mm-hmm.
that's touching back on the human side of things. This is you as you're a family man. You're investing your time, and like I said, we're just putting a rough estimate of a full day's worth of work, if not more, compiling. I'm talking about just compiling, all that in. And yes, you got
Yeah.
the figure for free, and people went, oh yeah, that's great. I can understand that that's just a host of more work. And yes, obviously there's a lot of passion behind it.
As well. I mean, like I say, with the photography medium, it's such a subjective thing,
Yes.
and people will always say, "Wait until you get it in hand." And yeah, fair enough. I think that will change a lot of people's perceptions because looking at a figure in your hand in 3D space where you can move it around, where it's not a static shot from a specific angle taken with a specific
Big
lens,
difference.
your brain is going to perceive that different from what that photograph was showing you because
Correct.
we all perceive things slightly differently. So yeah, I fully agree with some people when they say wait until you get it in hand, but at the same time I wouldn't say that all all the blogger photos are trash. The figure's going to look nothing like that because when you then do see photos taken of those same figures that people do get in hand, they look exactly like the blogger photos in
Yeah.
terms of the likenesses and stuff because you are photographing exactly what we have in hand.
And
So
one figure specifically that was a disappointment to me, and it wasn't because, and I found out that you did the photos for it, it wasn't your work, it was Hot Toys, was specifically, and I know we're on Deadpool, but is that Wolverine from Days of Futures Past, the Wolverine with the bone
mm-hmm.
claws. I saw that there was a
Yeah,
degradation in the sculpt from what Hot Toys shown versus the prototype. Like it softened quite a bit. But your photos,
yeah,
I was disappointed not with the photos. I was disappointed with the way the figure looked because I saw a difference in that. But I can say the figure on my shelf is exactly what you shot. So it's not you. It like in
yeah,
that case. So
yeah,
you represented,
yeah,
although I'm not happy with the product that Hot Toys did,
yeah.
your photos represented exactly what I have on my shelf. Like you did
Yeah, and I
exactly
think
what
that's the thing.
your goal
A lot of
was.
people will pounce on those blogger photos, but like I say, we are shooting what we have in hand. It's
Correct.
final product, and it's what you guys are going to get in
Yes.
a week or however long you're waiting for it to be delivered. So,
Yeah. I guess we'll leave it here with one final question, and then we could wrap up this because I
mm-hmm.
think we kind of hit the hour mark that we wanted to be at.
Yeah,
Real fast, do you have any advice for anybody that is doing toy photography, whether it's a hobby? Any advice out there for people that maybe are like, hey, how do I get started in doing it? It sounds like you were just posting your stuff on Instagram and just got that call, basically. I mean, it sounds like that's kind of what it is. Like, if you're
yeah,
passionate about it, just keep uploading and just get your stuff out there.
yeah. I mean, Instagram isn't what it used to be now. When I
Yeah.
started, I mean, the algorithms completely changed. It's really difficult to get traction on there now. But I mean, your stuff can still get seen. I'd say do it because you enjoy it first and foremost, and if you're not sure kind of where you are in terms of your own personal style, look at what others are doing, and don't be afraid to kind of imitate it to begin with. If you want to try outdoor photography, or if you want to try and capture everything in camera, or if you want to do what I do in terms of the compositing, try it all until you discover a part of that process that you enjoy, and that's how you want to do it. You might decide that you want to do all of them, and that's you'll develop a style naturally. But yeah, don't be afraid to kind of imitate people to begin with. If you want to try, I mean, or be influenced by people, definitely look out there on the community groups. There's so much fantastic photography out there nowadays. You can find it on Instagram, you can find it on Facebook, even Reddit has got hot toys groups and stuff now. So you won't be hard pushed to find stuff out there that can kind of inspire you. Yeah. So yeah, and just enjoy it at the end of the day. It's a great hobby. It's an escape, like I say, and yeah, just yeah, have fun with it.
That's it. So, like I said, thank you so much, Alex, for taking the time to speak with me. I hope we can stay in touch. I know we were talking back and forth.
Yeah, sure.
And trust me, when photos come out, I'm probably gonna be hitting you up because I'm excited because I know you you already know what's coming out. So I'm not gonna ask you like, hey, what's the next release? I'm not gonna do that. That's the confidential stuff. But it is cool to know that like, hey, what's next in the pipeline of what's coming out. So I'm not gonna talk to you about that because that's a confidential.
No worries.
Stuff. But I really do appreciate you taking the time. I know you sliced out some time for me today. And I really, like I said, thank you so much. I do hope we stay in touch. Like I said, we're friends on Instagram and we'll talk and just keep up. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And this video, I will have it edited and I'll have it up next week. I'm going to trim it out, so it's more proper. I don't think there was anything divulging that couldn't be said. Everything, as long as everything's good.
No, there's nothing in there that I'm unhappy with. So
everything's great. Absolutely. And I'm going to put all your information in there. People can reach out to you, Instagram, Facebook, and, follow you, share your stuff and support you. But once again, I thank you so much for taking your time and talking. And I hope we get to talk soon.
Thanks for inviting me, Ryan. I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you. We'll talk soon. Thank
you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Bye.
So I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. I personally had an absolute blast. Him and I just jived really well in terms of just speaking about everything. And I really hope that if there's anything that you take away from this is, like I said, there is a person behind the camera taking those photos, spending their time, not being paid for these photos. And as I said, it's meant to humanize the person. And what Alex has said, they are not being paid for this. And for many people who think, well, they're getting free toys out of it, when you understand the amount of time and effort that goes into the photos, you can quickly realize that sometimes just getting a free toy isn't compensation. But as I said, he is one that enjoys the hobby. So for him, this is a passion. He doesn't consider it a job, but he is weaving it in between his day-to-day life of being a husband, father, and working a regular 9-to-5 job. So it was a very impressive and I think eye-opening experience for me, one that I never saw on any of the other YouTube channels. So this is the closest we've gotten to. I hope I answered a lot of questions that you may have had as a viewer. I try to touch on things that I have seen repetitively asked in the comments of various photos. Alex has been gracious enough to come on again if there's ever more to talk about. He was a fantastic person to speak to, and I've corresponded with him multiple times on Instagram through DM, and he is just a very nice individual and someone that I hope that I can continue that friendship for moving forward, and we keep that communication going. He's just a fantastic person, and I think his work speaks for itself. So once again, thank you so much for tuning in to watch this conversation. Like I said, drop a like on the video. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed this and other content. And as always, this is Mr. Mom Collectibles, and I will see you guys in the next video.